Hello everyone, and welcome back to another Kerbal Space Program mod video. What are we doing today? Well, first I need to provide some background. The current mainline series on this channel is me starting a new save file in Kerbal Space Program and pretending that the Kerbals are only just starting to begin their journey into the cosmos. The canon of this save file is they haven't even left Kerbin's sphere of influence yet, but they're preparing to. We're currently working on establishing a permanent outpost on Minmus, which will feature a satellite network, surface-based fuel refinery for interplanetary missions, and an orbiting space station. Now, so far, we've built the fuel refinery, the space station, and the SATS network. But in last week's episode, two things dawned on me. One, it's a bit unrealistic that the Kerbals would establish a Minmus space station without first establishing a Kerbin space station, so that's what I did. And two, last week was the first time I discovered the amazingness that is the mod FreeIVA, which lets you walk around your base in first person. A lot of people in the comments of that video likened it to Subnautica, and I gotta say, I see the parallels myself. And having established the LKO station, I realised that a lot of the station parts would actually be better suited to a surface base rather than a microgravity environment, so would be good parts to potentially use for the Minmus surface base. So far, the only major parts mod I've used is Natea's stockalike station parts Redux, and so given the name, I'd naturally written the mod off as purely for zero-G structures. But now, I'm not so sure. So I figured I'd do a dry run test to see how well a surface base would come together using just the stock parts and the stockalike station parts mod. And again, it's kind of dumb that the Kerbals just immediately build an isolated surface base without first performing a terrestrial simulation of things here on Kerbin. In real life, NASA recently concluded the first of 3 missions to see how well we do on a Mars base. Last month, in July 2024, 4 simulated Martians egressed from a 3D printed simulated Mars habitat where they'd been living in isolation for the past 378 days, performing simulated Mars mission operations including Mars walks, growing and harvesting vegetables to supplement their non-perishable food, maintaining equipment and the habitat, and operates under additional stresses a Mars crew would experience, including up to 22-minute communication delays with Earth, simulated equipment failures, resource limitations, and of course, isolation. The ultimate goal here was to see how human health and performance would be affected when subjected to living under the conditions that a Mars mission would impose. And I figured, hey, maybe we can knock out 2 birds with 1 stone here. See if we can design a satisfactory surface base with stockalike station parts and stock pieces only, and make sure it works well with FreeIVA, of course, and then send our builds to the Kerbin Antarctic to ensure isolation and to, make sure that the crew don't go insane and eat each other over a simulated mission period. So that's what we're doing today. Now, when it came to building the surface base itself, the most glaring problem when it came to the freedom of the design was the fact that the modules were all fairly dependent on being stacked vertically rather than being able to be connected horizontally, so the main core of the base ended up being this big tower. But what is a tower if not a giant fuel tank, right? So when it came to drawing real-life inspiration for how to transport this structure to the Arctic, I looked no further than the Soviet Myasishchev Atlant. This was a repurposed M4 Molot bomber designed to carry large rocket boosters on its back and the Soviet space shuttle Buran. So I guess it was similar to the 2 shuttle carrier aircraft operated by NASA. Actually, I guess this Kerbal interpretation is probably closer in aesthetics to the NASA aircraft compared to the Soviet aircraft, but then again, it has no central tail fin, which is the same as the Soviet aircraft. So you let me know in the comments which aircraft visually you think this one is closer to. Anyway, the reason I didn't want a central tail fin is because in order to deploy the surface base, I'm actually going to fly the airplane upside down over the Arctic, detach the base, and allow it to descend by parachute down to the surface. And so I didn't want any structural pieces, like a tail fin, directly behind it so that it wouldn't slam into the aircraft and cause, all sorts of chaos when deployed. Here on screen, I'm just constructing an additional simulated Minmus rover that's going to sit in the aft cargo bay of the aircraft, which will get deployed upon landing. But here we are, on the runway, taking off. Now, despite the fact that this aircraft has 6 Goliath turbofan engines, it's quite a heavy, vehicle with that massive base strapped to its back, and of course it's not very aerodynamic either. So the runway in Kerbal Space Program 1 wasn't actually long enough for us to get airborne before we reached the end of it. One of the things I miss about Kerbal Space Program 2 is that it had really, really long runways at the KSC. But, you know, this thing would have been able to get off if we had a sufficiently long runway, so I'm just going to move on now and just have a look at the screen, I guess. Look at those beautiful stock volumetric clouds. Now, I don't know if you guys have ever attempted to fly a plane from the Kerbal Space Center to the Kerbin South Pole, but I, for one, thought it'd be a nice, quick endeavor, wouldn't take very long. It turns out it actually takes a really, really long time to get to the Kerbin South Pole. So as you can see, the footage has been played back at ludicrously high speed. I think it's not quite, because there's like sliders in my editing program, but I think it's about 40 times faster than real life. And of course, the eagle-eyed among you may notice in the top left of the screen, we also have 4 times physics time warp. So 40 times 4, let's do some quick maths. We're about 160 times faster than real life speed in this footage currently. And so the journey to the Kerbin South Pole didn't take quite as long as it would have done had we not done any of these tricks. And then when we arrived at the southern ice shelf, I dipped below the clouds and noticed it's very, very dark and very, very snowy. I couldn't really see the ground or what was going on. So I just flipped the plane upside down and deployed the surface base as I intended. And then I started leveling out the plane and realized on the altitude gauge I was very, very close to the ground, and the plane sadly exploded. So this isn't going to be the final landing that we do, because ideally I would like the plane to survive. And I thought I'd take this as a learning opportunity just to make sure the base could land safely, because yes, I hadn't actually tested any of this before flying to the Kerbin South Pole. I just had faith that it would. I just hoped. I used thoughts and prayers that it would work. And hey, there you go. As they say, any landing you can walk away from is a good one. A message that you can spread with my new merch design. Available now. Buy it as a shirt, a hoodie, or a sweater. I love it so much. This was custom designed exclusively for me, so you can't buy this design anywhere else, and I think this might just be my favorite merch design yet. There's a link in the description, and also I think you can link products in YouTube videos now, so maybe there's an on-screen thing if I manage to figure that out. But yes, check it out, and with that, let's continue the video. I just wanted to, I'm so excited. I love launching new merch. It's very exciting. So yeah, there we are. Anyway, we're going to try and do the landing again now. Let us attempt another landing of the base. This time I did it above the cloud layer to give us plenty of time for our aircraft to, pitch up and not slam into the ground. And also, because we are much higher up, the sun is still visible, so it's technically still day, so we can actually see what's going on. But as we dip below the clouds, the weather is going to intensify. We can no longer really see anything, unfortunately. So I just pitched the plane up, and then once we've done that, we're going to try and turn around and make our way back towards where the surface base will be landing. So I've got it set as our target there, so although we can't see it, we can kind of see whereabouts it is. And I guess it's hard to kind of see because I've sped the footage up so much, but in a second you'll see that our so far single target is highlighted by that kind of light green yellowish target. Yeah, it's suddenly split into multiple things, which means that something catastrophic has happened. It's clearly exploded on impact with the surface. Let's close in and see if we can see what happens. The plane is coming to touch down here, slowing down. Can't quite see anything yet. We're a few kilometers off, but there's nothing coming out of the surface. So clearly the base seems to have fallen through the surface of the ice shelf, which isn't good. And yeah, just as a final spite from the Kraken, we also get a phantom explosion. So I was starting to get worried. I was like, oh my goodness, is this mission going to be salvageable? Don't worry, guys. We did manage to pull things off at the end. And I did it by first saying, right, let's forget about landing at night, because I can't see what's going on. It's really hard for me to diagnose what's actually happening with this mission that's preventing it from going, as intended. So let's just land the plane as is, like this, in one piece, like with the payload still attached. We'll then time warp to daytime, relaunch, and see if we can, land it during the day. And if things go wrong, at least we can then actually see what's happening, and hopefully we can try and remedy things. So there is the ground looming into view as we pitch up to perform our final touchdown. I said at the beginning of this video that this plane needed a longer runway to take off. In case any naysayers are in the comments saying, no, it only took off because it was able to just fly off the edge of the runway, and if it was just on a constant flat plane, it wouldn't have lifted off. Well, now you can see that it does actually lift off. Admittedly, it's got half its fuel at this point, so it would be easier to take off anyway. So let's just move on. I don't know what point I was even trying to make there, to be honest. But as you can see, it is now daytime in the Kerbin South Pole. So let's accelerate and once again try and get ourselves airborne. So we are pitching up beautifully. And then we're just gonna go straight up, to be honest. Didn't think there was much need to do anything kind of long and overcomplicated flights. We're going to pitch up to a nice high altitude just to give the parachutes of the base time to deploy and decelerate it to safe landing speeds, and also to give the plane enough time to correct its course, pitch up, and make sure it doesn't slam into the southern ice shelf. Unlike my first nighttime attempt as well, I was quite careful to make sure, well, bad example because now the camera has changed, but I wanted to make sure for the most part the camera was always looking towards the surface base, just in case that did anything, and also so I could actually see what was going on. So if I could pinpoint the exact moment at which the thing broke apart, if it broke apart. But as you can see, that doesn't seem to have happened. It seems to still be in one piece. And furthermore, it appears to have successfully touched down on the Arctic surface. And there we are. We have visual confirmation that the tower is indeed in one piece and has survived touchdown. So now we can just carefully maneuver our aircraft towards it. The reason I want the aircraft to be fairly close is because I don't plan on like stranding the Kerbals there. First of all, I've got some A-listers on there. I know Jebediah Kerman's on there. I think Bill Kerman is on there as well. We don't want them stranded on some, you know, some base in the middle of the Kerbin Arctic. So we're going to want to recover them, bring them all home on board this aircraft. And of course, we've got to get the aircraft close because there is the Mars rover, the Minmus rover inside this aircraft. So we can test it out as an Arctic rover, see how easy it is to operate with spacesuits on, etc., etc. This is all a big simulated moon surface base mission, and I think this is quite cool. Actually, I don't think I've ever actually visited the Kerbin's North or South Poles before, at least by flying an aircraft there. I've probably done a mission where I've flown a rocket there at some stage, but I definitely haven't flown by plane before. So this was kind of a cool experience for me. Doesn't say, oh, cool experience. Get it? Yeah, terrible. I apologize. I then decided to use the FreeIVA mod to try and disembark the rover. Thought, I could use this hatch at the back, but I'd forgotten that I have a strut piece that needs to be removed by an engineer before that hatch becomes usable. So for now, we're going to have to go back into the main cockpit and exit, through that canopy. And we really are exploring strange new worlds, right? Well, I guess we're still on the world we came from, but strange new environments. I didn't realize how thick the snow would be in the Kerbal Arctic. I think this might be something to do with the parallax mod I have installed. I'm not sure. But yes, Mungar Kerman there was probably not expecting to be up to their neck in the ice surface. Now we can deploy the staircases of the base. And stairs, I feel like they're one of the biggest missed opportunities for both Kerbal Space Program 1 and Kerbal Space Program 2. I'm talking stock game here. It's amazing that we don't have any stock stairs of any kind, only ladders. So these are really, really nice. I'm already madly in love with these staircases, to be honest. So we've got the staircases deployed and we have the landing legs deployed as well. We also have the solar panel arms deployed. Now, my intention for them was to have them just stick out from the sides of the top of the base at 90-degree angles, but they're a bit too heavy and the motors in those hinges are a bit too weak for them to be able to do that. So instead I had to settle on, I think it was about minus 48 degrees I set them as, and then I used auto struts to lock them in place. I also locked the hinge piece as well to make sure they wouldn't move, and this is the best I could do for the solar array arms. But to be honest, I think this is kind of a happy accident, right? This looks... I don't know if it's just me going a little bit insane from having flown to the Arctic, but I think it looks a bit like a penguin, right? And, penguin, Arctic creatures, penguin base. Maybe it's a fitting aesthetic. I don't know. I think I kind of like the actualness. I like the necessary angle I had to use for the solar panel arms. Maybe you disagree, but I disagree with you. So there we are. Now we can get Ludwell Kerman, who's bravely taken his helmet off despite the chilling environment and the fact that the snow comes up to his neck, right? We'd also plant our flag as well to mark Arctic Base Alpha. Admittedly, my plan was to send further aircraft to this location to send more base pieces and build out this big thing, but to be honest, I couldn't really be bothered because it took so long to fly the aircraft here, and my genius landing method of flipping the aircraft upside down and dropping its payload, it's not actually a very precise means of landing things. So I feel like, we could just leave it at this tower. I feel like the tower is enough for me to establish what I wanted to establish in this mission and also draw the conclusions I wanted to conclude, and that is, are the stockalike station parts really good for surface bases where there is gravity, so you can't just float around and all that good stuff? So that's what we're doing in this little tour of the Arctic Tower. So this is, I don't remember the actual names of the pieces, but this is one of the hydroponics modules. It also has a small aquacultural segment as well. So this can be where the crew grow foods and things to survive. Then we have this module, which is I think it's called the Minerva Station Control Module. So this is where all the operations kind of happen. This is where the magic happens, guys. So we do computer stuff here. My background is biology in real life. I'm not so much at the computer side of things. But yeah, that's just where the operations happen, where we communicate with mission control, review data, I guess. Now we have... Oh, it's just fell a little bit just there. But now we have the beds, the bedding. What's it called? Habitation module. So all the Kerbals have their own little dormitory there. We don't need to have the dorms on a revolving ring because, of course, there is gravity here. So we can just have normal beds, I guess. Now we have, I believe this is the science modules. This is where all the science experiments happen. And as we open this door, there should be some windows. Oh, look at that view. That barren vista. The miles and miles and miles of Arctic wasteland as far as the eye can see. Very, very isolated. Perfect for this experiment in which we're testing how Kerbal crews will cope with such an isolated base. And now we've reached the top where we have the big observatory dome, and that is the tour of the base. I think this is absolutely more than adequate to serve as a prototype to see how Kerbals would do on an extremely isolated, long-duration surface mission on an alien body. Although, the Kerbin Antarctic, has breathable atmosphere and it's not completely alien, it's very, very hostile. Like, they need to wear their spacesuits to survive the frigid cold, and it's not like they can just return home, on a whim. We're a very, very long way from civilization here. So this is a good means of testing how well a Kerbal crew would cope when living and working on a hypothetical moon base. And I guess... I get that this is episode came way out of order. We already have a Minmus orbiting habitat, so Kerbals are already living through that. But let's just pretend this episode came first in this series. And I'm aware I said this last episode as well when I established the low Kerbin orbit space station. But it's a video game. Who cares? It's ultimately a game about space frogs. None of it matters. Please can someone tell it to Take Two Interactive, by the way. You didn't need to keep the KSP 2's development so secret. It's a game about space frogs. Okay, we're getting sidetracked here. Jebediah Kerman is going to embark very, very slowly as he struggles to embark the rover on a test of the rover in very, very hostile conditions. It's snowing outside, but we can just test the rover, make sure it works okay. And then I remembered, oh yes, I put a ladder on the top of this rover because I am sometimes good at Kerbal Space Program. And I get that's not really a metric of being good at KSP, remembering to add ladders. But come on. We've all been there, right? We've all been there where we landed on some surface base that needs a ladder. And then we realized we didn't add one. So actually, I'm chalking that as a whim. It's fine. And Jebediah can begin his epic odyssey across the Antarctic surface in this little rover here. Now, I get the rover is kind of a cumbersome design. To be honest, guys, I wasn't even intending on bringing a rover in this video. I was like, oh, we actually got cargo space in the back of the aircraft for something. So let's just build a rover inside the cargo bay. That's why the build time lapse was so awkward, because I kind of built it without planning to. So I sort of built it within the cargo bay just to ensure it would fit inside the cargo bay. I didn't really put much thought into the design of it, which is why it's just so ugly. But hey, it's ugly because in the canon of this mission, this was only a prototype rover. Aesthetics were not even considered when assembling it. It was more that, hey, we've built this specialist aircraft to take this base to the Arctic. Can we fit some sort of rover in it? And that was also the real design process that I went through myself when designing it. So it's like gamer meets game characters moment. To be honest, that came out better in my head than it did when I spoke into the microphone. But here is Jebediah anyway, taking our prototype rover out for a test drive. We needed our most crackpot pilot to test this because it's an untested vehicle. We don't know how well it's going to go. And as you can see, it did not go that well. It flipped over. So we learned that we should not take this exact rover design to Minmus when we actually build our Minmus surface base for real. So hey, another thing that we have learned when it comes to designing our Minmus surface base. Now I'm just activating time warp so that our Kerbals can spend a meaningful amount of time living and working aboard our Arctic surface base. So to simulate a space mission, I aimed for 50 days. I slightly overshot with the time warp, but it was okay. 51 days. Starliner has overshot by 7 weeks so far and climbing. So I'm going to count this as a win. Anyway, with our 50 plus 1 day mission duration completed, it's time to get our Kerbals on board the aircraft so we can get them back home. Yes, guys, I do it for you guys. I was thinking like maybe I could just teleport them back to the Kerbal Space Center, or the base is on the surface of Kerbin, which means we can just press recover, thus teleporting everyone back to the Kerbal Space Center. But I felt like that wouldn't really have been in the spirit of this mission, right? I set about sending the Kerbals here on an aeroplane with excess seating on board so that all the Kerbals could disembark the Arctic base once the mission was done, board the aircraft, and then return back home as, I intended. And so I felt it would only be right for me to, suffer a second time and not just fly the Kerbals all the way from the Kerbal Space Center to the Antarctic, but fly the Kerbals back again. Now, you already saw me moving the Kerbals from the Arctic Tower to the aircraft. I started to get bored watching the footage back, so I crossfaded, but, I did do it legitimately. I feel like at this point, using cheats to move Kerbals across wouldn't even be worth it at this point, but I moved all of them across, and now we can set about performing our liftoff off the southern ice shelf, which is a mercifully flat and long stretch of terrain. Easily enough, there we are, for our aircraft to get airborne. Then we can just retract the landing gear and set off. Now I am once again, don't worry, I am once again going to speed the footage up as fast as I possibly can as we punch our way through the cloud layer. My goodness. I mean, although this was kind of a tedious chore, flying the Kerbals back to the Kerbal Space Center, it was made much, much easier by the beauty of BlackRack's stock volumetric cloud. So, yeah, beautiful looking mod. You might have noticed the temperature gauges appeared on those Goliath engines because we no longer have the massively heavy and draggy surface base on the back of this aircraft. Suddenly, we're a bit overkill when it comes to engine power. And so having all 6 Goliath engines running, it caused massive amounts of overheating because we're going too fast. So I deactivated the 2 engines that were closest to the aircraft's fuselage, and there we are back at the Kerbal Space Center already. Oh wow, I feel cheated actually. I was about to go on some massive big long spiel about aircraft design and how long this took, because in my mind when I flew this it took ages, but now it's done. So yeah, don't know what else to add there. I suppose at this point I should say thank you so much for not only watching this video, but also putting up with my voice. I've had this horrible cold for the past few days, so if that's why I sounded weird, that would be why. Well, here we are, slowing down, decelerating. I activated reverse thrust of those Goliath engines. And there we are. Oh, just in the nick of time before reaching the end of the runway. But yes, thank you so much for sticking around this long. And of course, big thank you now to my Patreon supporters and my YouTube channel members who do make all of this content possible. Their name's on the left there. If you want to see your name in lights there, then go ahead and click the relevant links in the description. But yeah, that's at the end. That's the end of the video, right? So I hope you enjoyed it, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.